Item 3B is countywide elected compensation, and I'll turn this over to Commissioner Fernando.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like the opportunity to briefly introduce both 3B and 3C.
Okay.
I had written in an email that I'm open to a layover motion or whatever motion others would see fit, but thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues. Both of these items relate to establishing 2025 and 2026 maximum salary levels for Hennepin's 9 elected officials. 3B to establish a maximum salary for countywide electeds, and 3C to establish a max salary for commissioners. Due to open meeting law, I'd like to emphasize for the public that this is our first discussion on this topic, and the language is very, very recent. So first about me, I have formal training, expertise, and leadership experience in human resources, including compensation and pay equity. Since joining the board in 2019, I've consistently emphasized wages and incomes for residents, workers, and Hennepin County employees. I am proud of the county's data-driven, holistic approach to HR, and am extending Hennepin's HR methodology into these two board actions. Second, on timing and governance. State statute requires that commissioners vote on their salaries prior to the November general election. I spent the last 6+ months reviewing data from staff and others and gathering additional data to inform the proposed compensation philosophy for Hennepin County elected officials document that I authored and sent to my elected colleagues last week. From this document, I requested admin and council, thanks to you all, to translate my proposed compensation philosophy for the 9 elected officials into 2 board actions that are statutorily and operationally compliant. So those are the 2 items that are here, 3B and 3C. Third, on HR best practice. Within HR disciplines, there's significant emphasis on compensation package and benefit set that accompanies a job. Salaries are a reflection of and connected to the scope of responsibilities that accompanies a particular job. What is the size of the organization, the size of the workforce? How many people are affected by the decisions? What is the share of the work they are responsible for? What is that share relative to all of the work occurring in that particular space? What is the fiduciary or financial scope? What's the complexity or risk associated with the job? And so on and so on. In addition to reflecting the job itself, salaries also indicate recruitment and the potential talent or expertise levels who might be attracted to the position. Through an HR lens, salary level has a direct impact on who applies for the role, which is uniquely interesting in a representative democracy where HR process does not select, but it's the people and the electoral voting process that decides who gets the job. Fourth, regarding method, the most common compensation methodology is to identify peer sets in order to place into context potential salary amounts. Usually an organization will develop a band or grade system, which results in salary ranges that attach to job classes. For example, here at Hennepin, there's a salary range or band for assistant county administrators, directors, managers, and so on. After detailed inquiry and review, I can say with immense confidence and pride that Hennepin County has limited to no peer jurisdictions. I mean, this is kind of cool, really. When factoring in scope, size, share, funding, governance model, this means that looking toward other jurisdictions are helpful in setting context. However, it's clear that this method is inadequate from an HR lens. So instead of seeking externally for peer jurisdictions, I am proposing that the 9 elected officials attach internally to Hennepin County's existing compensation structure, identifying only 2 job classes among us, countywide elected officials and commissioners, 3B and 3C. And I recommend focusing on the ACA band, the Assistant County Administrator band for both job classes. I'm proposing countywide electeds maximum salary to be the middle value of the ACA range, the middle value, and commissioner maximum salary at the lowest value of the ACA range. This is meaningful because public sector is already at a percentage of private sector compensation. And then on top of that, I agree that the public expects electeds to be, further lower, further I was going to say discounted. I probably shouldn't say that. But I am a deal. We're a great deal. Sorry, you could tell I'm a little bit nervous. Last, on representative democracy and pay equity. It is essential in a representative democracy that all backgrounds and life circumstances who attain these positions are able to professionally perform in these consequential leadership positions, who are responsible for so much of the health, vibrancies, services, infrastructure, and vision of the county, region, and the entire state of Minnesota. These board actions establish maximum salary levels for electeds. So if for any reason an elected doesn't need this revised salary level, they are able to select a lower value. I believe in a county where generational wealth or additional income is not a prerequisite to serving as a Hennepin elected official. In 2019, Commissioner Conley and I were sworn in as the first and only commissioners of color since Hennepin's founding in 1852. I'm the first of many things. Board chair of color, Filipino American elected in Minnesota. I'm often the youngest or the only woman, and I am proudly a child of immigrants. So this is not a comfortable board action. However, I've stood in front of many rooms promising that while I am the first, I will work very hard to ensure I am not the last. Setting maximum salary levels that are rooted in data and incorporates lived realities for so many of us is an essential component to making sure that there are many, many more after me. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence. I'm happy to make a layover motion at any point, or am prepared to discuss what I've proposed, should that please you or the body. Thank you.
I would like to make a motion to approve. It's been moved and seconded. I'd like to make some comments about this. As vice chair, our chair has shared a great deal of the body of the work that she has put into looking at this. The county itself has a great body of work of what they have done to make sure there is just compensation, not only for this county board, not only for those electeds, but for every person who works within Hennepin County. That matters. We have a diverse work group, and we try to pay them what they deserve so that they have a living wage and so that they can go home and pay the bills that they have. And it's long overdue that we would look at our own selves. I know it was a couple years ago that I had gone to Administrator Huff and asked that our own staff, I couldn't hire staff in my office because our pay was not equitable to those even around us. And we looked at that, we do a market study, we elevate those pays when we find them. And we go through on a regular basis, department by department, to do this work. And yet we left ourselves out. And it is your leadership that has brought us to the stark reality that we really need to be looking at ourselves. If we want to set a legacy for the people who will come after us so that we get good governance, we need to at least get an equitable pay for the people sitting up here on the bench. So I'm not talking just about myself, I'm talking about the people who come after me. And so I think that one of the things you have done in this is talk about a real classification. We haven't had a real classification. That really matters. That puts us where we need to be. That also says that we have a certain standard to meet too. And I don't think that's a bad thing either. I think standards and ethics are a great thing. And so I just want to say that I wholeheartedly thank you for all this great work, and I support this, and I will be an affirmative on this. Do other colleagues wish to speak? Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Commissioner Fernando, for bringing this forward and for offering a perspective. I can't in good conscience, before I go too far here, is this an approval for both items or
For both items.
Okay. I would really like to separate.
You'd like to separate and split the
divide
question?
these.
That's a friendly amendment. Is that a friendly amendment with a seconder?
So,
It's a friendly amendment with a seconder.
so I wholeheartedly agree that we need to make sure that we have a compensation model that is fair, that keeps in context the work that we do, the responsibilities that we have. I also think that when we are looking at making adjustments of this nature, that we look at it in context of our entire workforce. The amount that is being proposed for our specific salaries are well outside of the range that we would offer to adjust for, I think, any other job classifications. When I got elected 3.5 years ago, I knew what the compensation was. It was less than I was making in the public sector, or private sector, sorry. And my goal was public service. And I feel like I am honestly fairly compensated for the work that I do. Do I think an increase in the cost of living adjustment is appropriate? Absolutely. I think we should all make sure that we do that for ourselves and for our employees. This is what leadership should be at this level, is making sure that the organizational is going in that direction. I do take some issue being put at the same classification as our assistant county administrators, because we hire the best people. And not that the residents of Hennepin County haven't hired or elected the best people to represent them, but the job responsibilities for us is to represent the voice of our residents and turn that into action that we request our assistant county administrators and the county administration to put into action. The jobs are different and very distinct. And so I think that for me, recognition of the work that we expect our county administration to do is different than the work that the public expects us to do. And so I won't be voting in favor of this. I think a modest increase to make sure that we're reaching our cost of living is completely appropriate. But I can't vote in good conscience for the level of increase for the commissioner's salary. I do think that we should take a different look for the countywide electeds to make sure that we are appropriately compensating the other two electeds and doing a market analysis of the surrounding areas and trying to find a way that is appropriate. I know that we are not currently compensating the other countywide electeds at comparable levels. And so I would really like to see that happen. That is disconnected necessarily from our ACAs, because they also have different job responsibilities. They have different statutory requirements for being on the ballot than we do. So I think having them in the same process is not the way I would approach this. So thank you.
Commissioner Edison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I get, just confirm, have we agreed that we're going to divide?
We are going to divide the question.
Okay,
That was
great. Thank
confirmed.
you. Thank you. Okay. Well, I would like to speak to, in support of 3B. And I want to thank Chair Fernando for moving the county attorney and the sheriff at the same level. I think that was a really good move. I do actually have my staff do research on the comparable other counties as well for the salary. And looking at Anoka for the county attorney, the Anoka has 218,000, so I think we would be in line. Carver is 213, Dakota's 219. And then also for the sheriff, Anoka is at 208, Carver's 190, Dakota's 192. So I think that, I mean, I feel pretty good about the numbers that you landed on for that. And to speak to 2C, or excuse me, 3C. So I was elected 8 weeks ago, so I'm not going to pretend to know this job in the same way that you do. I genuinely am not going to. But I will say it's hard to look at a 50% increase when I come from the legislature and what we made. And so also that I know that we're going to be doing negotiations with labor, and I don't know anybody that gets a 50% increase. So I guess I would be in favor of what Commissioner Anderson said, is really looking to what labor negotiations and are matching our increase with that. That's where I would align with 3C.
Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Chair Fernando, for teeing this up. This is always a conversation with its own dynamics, and as you alluded to, the requirement that it be done before the election, which I think is absolutely appropriate, but I really appreciate you bringing this conversation forward, and really want to sort of second a lot of what you said in your opening remarks about the robustness of the data that you have provided us. Thank you very much. The timing I just alluded to, that it's HR best practice to look at compensation, specifically salary, and the method of calculation, sort of what is and what isn't possible for a role like this. And I really want to especially elevate what you said about representative democracy and pay equity. That is huge. And we're thinking about equity so much more aggressively at Hennepin County over the course of my last 10 years here. And I think it's fully appropriate to take that lens and look at these roles. And I would sort of also maybe coming in from the side and seconding that sense within me that we need to look at that is, I see other jurisdictions or other elected bodies really struggling to get as diverse as they need to get. And I think that I was actually going to name the legislature as a place where I think salaries do need to be raised for legislators in order to be a place where truly every Minnesota can consider running for those jobs, because we need every Minnesotan represented in those chambers. I also want to sort of maybe wrestle aloud verbally with making an adjustment like this that is true would be highly unusual for us for an internal job classification. And it does sort of cause a pang, I'll acknowledge. I also felt like it was absolutely compelling and fundamental that we did that recently for our county administrator job classification. And so I'm thinking of that and how I definitely warmed up to that. I felt like it was appropriate. I also would comment, I also came to this work from the private sector, and the salaries here, the salaries for elected officials, I think in general, are lower than the private sector. The salaries for public sector employees are lower generally than those in the private sector. And there's no relation between this either my current salary or possibly my future salary and what I would be making if I was still doing the same work that I had done in the private sector. They're vastly different, and not that I'm not at all a proponent that we try to keep up with the private sector, but I'm aware that we're making adjustments. My sense, and certainly my knowledge of this body, is that we are adjusting year on year at a much slower rate. So the gap between the public and private sector is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't even look to what my peers in the private sector are making anymore, because the relationship is so different. In any event, a concluding remark. For all of those reasons, I think this is a difficult and complicated conversation, but one that I'm absolutely here for, and I do support items 3B and 3C.
Commissioner Conley.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the research and the background that went into this, so thank you. It is a reminder that when we first came in, There had been a vote previously that we not receive any increase in compensation, and that lasted about 3 years. So I think it makes sense that we have a kind of a job class to reference, and it's very distinct how you have included that, and so the research is there. I really trust your expertise in terms of HR and the work that it is that we do given our districts. And even with our countywide electeds, this is a very large county. There's a lot of responsibility. We have just seen over the weekend how all hands are on deck just in Minneapolis through our sheriff's department coming in to help out. And so I think that this makes sense. It makes fiscal sense. And I think it's a very effective way to do this, given that there isn't really another way to do it. So thank you.
Seeing no other comments, we've already moved item 3B, we want to do them separately. So all those in favor of item 3B, which is countywide elected compensation, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item 2C, which is commissioner compensation. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. 2 noes and 4 ayes. This motion passes. And that concludes our agenda, and I will move it on to Commissioner Conley.